Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abuel-Samad.
We've made it a year, officially.
Yeah, one year ago today, as we record this, we published the first episode.
Yeah, we're not quite to 52 episodes.
Yeah, we missed a couple in there.
We're getting close. Yeah. Well, we've had a year with 2 weeks of vacation.
That's right. Had some vacation and, some travel and stuff like that in there. And so, there were a couple times when, we just didn't manage to get one out. But we do our best to satisfy your automotive discussion needs every week. And
I'm sure it's got to be at least worth what everybody's paying for it. So
absolutely.
There's that.
I mean, if you're not satisfied, just let us know. We'll give you back every penny that you paid for it.
That's exactly right. All right. Well, so let's get to what we've been driving. This week, it's a very Mercedes-centric garage or driveway, whatever we're going to call it. But so, you know what? You have the bigger, better one, so you can go first.
Okay. So I've been driving. I was driving for the past week the 2018 Mercedes S560 4MATIC, and so this is the new refreshed version of the S-Class, which just came into the fleet in the last couple of weeks, and got a bunch of updates this year. The U.S. spec version still doesn't get the new powertrains that they're starting to offer in Europe. The new 3-liter inline six, which is the return of the inline six to the Mercedes lineup, and it doesn't have the 48 volt electrical system, but the S560 does have a very nice twin turbocharged 4-liter V8, which is it's a wonderful engine. I mean, it's a fairly big, heavy car, but this engine does okay. It's no AMG S63, but it'll do. I can live with it.
So overall, it's a big coupe. It's not supposed to be a sports car, right? So
no, it's a sedan. This was the Ford.
I'm sorry, sedan. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I had coupes on the mind because I had a coupe. So, but I'm sure it fits the S-Class mold that's been cast for years, right? It feels like a proper top of the range Mercedes.
Oh, absolutely. It's exactly what you would expect of a big Benz. It's got, all the luxury features, and for $150,000, it should have, everything that you would expect of a big Benz. But
wow.
It's got all the luxury accoutrements, all the technology that Mercedes-Benz can muster, including the latest and greatest version of their intelligent drive system. And this was the reason why I happened to get this car at this point in time, because after I published my write-up of the Cadillac CT6 Super Cruise system a few weeks back, I heard from one of my contacts at Mercedes, Christian Bokic. He's a communications manager there, and he wanted to get me in this car to get my impressions of their version of the system. And Super Cruise, they call it a level 2, level 2.5 system. So that means it's got partial automation. So it's got a lot of automated features, but it's not a self-driving car, no matter what any dimwit from the New York Times might think.
I'm not sure what you're talking about there. I can't imagine what you've read.
Yeah, in case anyone from the New York Times is listening, there are no self-driving cars available for sale today anywhere.
Look, that's just
from Tesla, not from Volvo, not from Mercedes, and not from Cadillac or anybody else.
You're being too much of a precision enthusiast. It doesn't make a good headline to say, I drove the the semi. You can't even say semi-autonomous, right? I drove the
semi-automated or semi-autonomous is fine.
Okay.
Because it's not capable of being fully autonomous. It's not capable of taking a full control and driving the vehicle without human input.
Yeah, see, that's not as punchy of a headline.
No, but having headlines that are punchy but non-factual are is part of the reason why we're in the current political situation we are in today.
And Sam veers us right into the ditch. So anyway, what was your impression of the Mercedes system?
Okay, so first of all, unlike the Cadillac system, the Mercedes Intelligent Drive is not a hands-off system. So that means you do have to keep your hands on the wheel, or at least, in close enough proximity to the wheel, that it feels you occasionally nudging it and moving it. And one other differentiator that this system has, for Super Cruise, Cadillac actually builds capacitive sensors into the steering wheel. So in those instances where it does occasionally ask you to touch the wheel, with the Cadillac, all you have to do is touch it. You don't actually have to move the wheel to make it think that you're holding the wheel. It's just looking for contact. In the case of the Mercedes system, it's using the sensor in the steering column that detects wheel motion, and that's how it tells. So even if you're holding the wheel, if you happen to be holding it extremely steady, it might think that you're not actually holding the wheel. So you do kind of have to maybe twitch it just slightly, just to let it know, hey, yeah, you're still here and paying attention. So it is a hands-on system, but given that you don't have to really grasp the wheel most of the time when Intelligent Drive is active. It will, for the most part, track down the lanes. And like the Mercedes E-Class we talked about back in the summer that I drove, the S-Class now has a stereo vision camera system up front that's supplied by Autoliv, a Swedish supplier, and it's a vastly superior system to the systems from Mobileye, which are all monovision systems. It's very consistent, very reliable in its ability to detect lane markers, even ones that are badly faded. And on Sunday, took a drive up north with my wife, and coming back, we got in some pretty heavy rain. And even with the rain coming down pretty good, it was still pretty reliably picking up the lane markings on the highway. And it was able to keep the system active, which is much more than I can say for most of the other lane keeping systems I've tried. It did, after about 20 minutes of a particularly heavy downpour, there was enough crud that had built up on the radar sensor that it did come up and say, sensor's dirty, system's going to disengage now, take over full control. And so for about the next 10 minutes or so, I did have to take full control of the vehicle, steering and everything. And eventually, the rain continued, but it slowed down a bit, and it did rinse off the sensor by itself, and so it was able to resume. But that's the sort of thing that, if we're looking towards a fully automated future, car makers are going to have to address how you keep those sensors from getting mucked up, by the environment. And this wasn't even a case of rain and salt spray. I mean, it was, a fall afternoon, and it was just a heavy downpour that caused the sensor to become obscured to the point where it could not guide the vehicle. So, in general, that part of the system worked pretty well. I thought the lane control was not quite as confident feeling as the Cadillac. One advantage the Cadillac has, the Cadillac uses a monovision camera, single camera looking down the road, but it also uses the two cameras in the side mirrors that are looking down at the lanes to help with the lane centering. And I thought the Cadillac did a little bit better job of, consistently keeping the car in the middle of the lane and tracking the lane really well. But, and the Mercedes Mercedes occasionally wandered a little bit, and when it, when we're going through a curve, you could feel it kind of, wandering a little bit back and side to side as it negotiated the curve. But the Mercedes does have some interesting capabilities that the Cadillac does not, including automatic lane change. So, as you're driving down the road, if you want to change lanes, all you have to do is just tap the turn signal in whichever direction you want to go. And, as long as your hands are, just lightly on the wheel, just enough to, so it senses that you're there, when it's clear, when it's all clear, the car will just slide over one lane, to the left or to the right, whichever direction you indicated with the turn signal. So that was, that part works well. But then it also has some other really neat features that the Super Cruise system doesn't have, or any other system for that matter, because it like Super Cruise, Mercedes is using the mapping system in the car as a long range sensor. So it's looking down the road at what's coming up, and like the Cadillac, if there's a curve in the road ahead of you, it will depending on what your set speed is, it can automatically slow you down a little bit if needed, to make sure you can get through that curve safely, and then resume whatever your set speed was. But it also does some other cool things. Like, first of all, the intelligent drive is not geofenced to highways. So you can actually use it in the cities because it is a hands-on system. So they allow you to use it even in urban environments. And if you're driving along, if you've got the intelligent drive turned on, and you tap the turn signal, if you're on city streets, if you tap the turn signal, it'll look at the map, look ahead at the map for where the next road is, the next corner. So if you tap the right turn signal, it'll look for the next street on your right, and as you approach it, it will automatically slow the car down, just as a human driver would. Ideally, and
who slows down to take turns? Right?
Bring it to a reasonable speed so you can get around the corner without having to touch the brake pedal. And then as you come around the corner, it'll automatically resume whatever your set speed was. And similarly, around this area here, in the Ann Arbor area, there's a lot of roundabouts in this area now. And if you're driving down the road and coming up to a roundabout, the system will detect, and I've got a video that I'm putting together that'll show you some of this stuff. But as you're approaching a roundabout, the car will automatically slow down to a speed that can get you through the roundabout, and then resume your preset speed on the other side. So that was really cool. And it's a cool use of the technology, combining the maps with the sensors and everything else, to reduce some of the workload. Now, whether you actually need any of this, is debatable, because you still have to pay attention. You still have to have your hands on the wheel. So
yeah, but I don't want to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Finish your thought. Because the E400 coupe that I talked about last week, and we'll talk about a little bit more this week, also had, I think it had intelligent drive, although it's not on the Monroney as intelligent drive.
Yeah, it has, it's listed as Drive Pilot on the E-Class.
What are they? Yeah, and so I'm not seeing Drive Pilot here either, but it had all that stuff. Like, it might not have done the lane changes, but it had the suite of, lane keeping assist and all of the different, dynamic cruise control, and it had the actual steering assist as well. And I found that it did wander in the lanes. Like, it made me feel like, is it going to pay attention and nudge me back into the center? It wasn't sort of as responsive or quick to react as I would have liked, and as the BMW the week before. But I also found that, yes, it requires your attention, the whole thing. It doesn't require as much of your attention, though. You can sort of slack off a little bit, and that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you if you still have to pay attention, but it lets you slack off, is that a good thing? I'm not convinced it is.
No, I don't think it is.
Because if all of a sudden you do have to take over full control again, and it's the same thing, even more so, as you approach a level 3 system like what Audi's putting on the new A8, which lets you take your attention away from the road entirely. It's a hands-off system, and you don't even have to watch the road like as you do with the Cadillac system. I'm more and more convinced that that's a bad idea. I like the driver assist. I think, adaptive cruise control is great. I think, a lane keeping system, is fine. But as we start to nudge past that, I think we're, getting into that uncanny valley. I'm just not convinced it's a great idea. I think, the stuff that the Mercedes system does, it does really well. But it's just in general, and this is not a knock on Mercedes, but it's a knock on the industry as a whole. I'm more inclined to think that the approach that Waymo is taking and also that Ford is taking, of going, keeping it, level 1 systems, advanced driver assist systems, and then going straight to level 4 systems that require no human intervention. I think that's probably a better idea.
But, I understand the position that Mercedes is in too. We're talking in particular about the autonomous or automated tech that's in it. But overall, it's still... This is an S-Class, and I had an E-Class, and these are lovely automobiles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the greatest things I realized about this thing after I had been driving it for about 5 days. Earlier this week, for the first time, it got really cold here, and actually, down below freezing overnight.
I know where you're going, and I like it.
It's not at all uncommon for cars to have heated seats these days. Most mainstream models offer, at least as an option, heated seats, and in some cases even heated rear seats. But this S-Class was the first time I've had a car with heated armrests.
Yes.
So
it's pretty good, isn't it?
I get in this car and I press the seat heater button on the door, and after half a minute or so, I start feeling warmth in my arms, in my elbows, and it's like, whoa, what is this? And that's one of those really nice little details that you can put into a car, when you're charging $150,000 for it.
Yeah, or 90 in the case of the E400 coupe. And they're great cars. We're talking about sort of the differentiator now is this tech suite among so many of these high-end cars, because otherwise we'd be talking about a BMW with xDrive or an Audi with Quattro, or the Mercedes with 4MATIC, and that's about all the sort of the technical mechanical bits you can really differentiate. I mean, the engines are all pretty similar. They're all turbocharged gas engines of some sort or another. There's just less daylight in between all the varieties, and really the tech suites is what separates these cars. And so while we may think it's not a great idea, they have to offer this stuff. And I don't know whether they how do you back out of it?
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. It's one of those cases where, just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should. Just because they have the technical capability to do what they're doing. I'm not. The more I drive these vehicles with these partially automated systems, the less convinced I am that it's a great idea.
Well, maybe we're learning that all together.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. And the systems are getting better and better and better.
Oh, they absolutely are. This. Because the differences between intelligent drive and Super Cruise are enough. There's some overlap, but there's also a lot of distinctions there. Some of the things that Super Cruise does, it does really well. And the things that Intelligent Drive does, it does really, really well. I'd be hard pressed to say that one is definitively better than the other, because they don't do the same things. So it's hard to say. And each of them have their limitations, and it's those limitations that I find troubling, and that I think a lot of customers will potentially find troubling, in terms of it's like I'm paying this money for these features, and yet it can't really do what it is I want it to do, which is just to take over the driving task for me. I still have to pay, even though it's a little bit less attention, I still have to pay attention. And that the fact that you're paying that little bit less attention potentially means that when something does happen, you might end up being in more trouble. I don't know. It's a challenging question, and I don't know that I know the right answer.
See, so here's what I get a little hung up on too, is the in the E400, it was a $9,300, $9,350 for the Premium 3 package that included all that stuff. I think you could probably hire a part-time driver for $9,350.
Well, and that's the thing. Lincoln, is in several markets now is offering the chauffeur service, where on those occasions when you don't want to drive, on a date night or something like that, you can call up the Black Label concierge and have them send you over a driver that they have vetted, and that you're paying for, and they will come to your house and they will drive you around to wherever it is you want to go. And I think I'd actually rather use that.
That's not a bad idea, right?
I don't know. I can sit in the back in this beautiful reclining seat, and that it's like a business class seat on an airliner, in the back of this S-Class. When my wife and I went, we went up north on Sunday, she decided she wanted to sit in the back, which she almost never does, because she could recline and put up the footrest and turn on the seat heater and the massage system in the back seat. And there was a screen back there, and she could sit back there and do her knitting and listen to whatever media she wanted to.
That sounds delightful.
Yeah.
That's great. And so let's talk about that, because that's, I think, something that we're missing is these are, I wonder how many people.
I forgot the refrigerator.
Oh, it has a refrigerator. That you put a bottle of wine in.
It was funny when I picked up the car from the airport when I returned from my trip to California last week, and I opened up the trunk to put my bag in there, and I noticed this big box in the middle of the trunk, which I assumed initially was some kind of giant subwoofer, but I realized later, when I was crawling around inside the car to take some pictures, I saw it has the center console down the middle. So it's a 4-seat configuration. So there's only 2 seats in the back, and I saw this door between the 2 rear seats, and I opened it up, and there was another door behind, and I realized I opened it up, and it was a refrigerator big enough to hold 3 champagne bottles.
Which you promptly filled it up with, I hope.
Well, I unfortunately did not have any champagne bottles handy, but it's one, and it's just all this luxury in this car, and it would be nice to, be able to sit in the, have somebody else do the driving, in lieu of having a fully automated system, to have somebody else do the driving so I could sit in the back and relax and enjoy this luxury.
Yeah. That was, I think, what left me the most astounded, and sort of where I was going was, I wonder how many people who buy or lease these cars understand how much they're actually getting. Like, it's a lot of car. I had the opportunity to put the E400 up on the lift at my brother-in-law's place. I just wanted to see sort of how because it's not a huge car. I wanted to see how they crammed everything in.
And boy, did they cram stuff in there.
Yeah, but it's still like, we talk about the German cars being just beautifully engineered. You can't see any of it unless you get under it, and then you see all of it, and it is a masterpiece. Just it's hidden. It's got underbody trays all the way back. It's all aero. There's just plastic covers over most of everything. There's little cutouts for the catalytic converters so they don't burn the thing up and stuff. But it's very impressively packaged. You've got with the 4MATIC cars, you've got the transmission and the transfer case. There's a front drive shaft just sort of tucked up there, and then the way it drives the differential, and the differential goes across right below the engine, and just all of the details. This aluminum subframes and extrusions welded to the cast or forged pieces, and it's just the dirty bits are really, really good, really clever. Yeah. I don't think that's ever appreciated anymore because these are luxury cars, and especially the S560 for sure. Like that's not just your sort of like, I want an S class, I'm going to buy the S class I can just most easily get into. Like that's a serious S class purchase. You got to know what that is to get it. And the E400 coupe, again, like you've got to kind of know what it is, or want it. And I think you want both of those maybe for the style, and the other sort of more opulent stuff. But I don't think that the sort of underlying German techie impressiveness ever really comes out.
Well, especially, on modern cars, if you open the hood, you usually have this massive cover over the engine, so you can't even see the engine and appreciate the technology that's there. And as you said, even if you crawl underneath, everything's covered with bodywork, to minimize the aerodynamic drag. And you don't realize how much amazing work went into creating these things. How much effort, engineering effort and design effort went into putting all this together. And then, if you ever visit, the factory where these things are built, or actually visit any assembly plant, any modern assembly plant, and you watch how they build cars, you've got tens of thousands of parts that come together, and it somehow, unless you're in a Tesla factory, they all come together at just the right time along the line and get assembled together into this piece of machinery that works at the end of the line, and usually, you can ship it off to the dealer from there without also shipping seats and display screens and other parts, separately for the dealer to finish building the car at the retail outlet.
That's mean.
Hey, you know what? It may be mean, but it's absolutely true, and I frankly think it's well deserved. It's building complex machinery is hard. It's not.
Yeah, man,
It's not a trivial thing. And I have done software and I've done hardware, and I know software is difficult too, but it's far more complex to build, to put together something as sophisticated as a modern car and have it work right the first time than it is to do a lot of the software stuff that gets put out there. Which when that stuff doesn't work, it's not that big a deal. But a car has to work, or people's lives are at stake.
Yeah, well, I think that if you think from the software approach, that seems to be, to me, sort of the exact approach that Tesla has been taking is design, ship, test.
Yes,
Which,
exactly.
I've dealt with lots of software like that. Yeah, but I was just astounded by it. Even for $90,000, like looking around, and I'm sure at 150, if you start to really poke around the S-Class, you'll come away with a better understanding of why it's that expensive, beyond the fact that it's a very high-end luxury car. You see evidence of it being worth that when you start to poke at it. At least I did. And it's great to drive. I was, it got me thinking. Driving the E400 coupe made me think about what Lincoln could do to differentiate itself. And this is not the right move for Lincoln right now because it's not where any of the buyers are in the market. But just thinking back how in the past they had like the LSC, which was a version of the Mustang. Now there's just such a much better Mustang. I wonder what Lincoln could do if they wanted to make a car based on the Mustang, but much more differentiated than the LSC was from the Mustang. But a coupe Lincoln that's just a high-end luxury coupe.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to use the S550 platform as the basis for a Lincoln Coupe or even a Lincoln sedan, I think that they could come up with something really special. Unfortunately, I think that's very unlikely to happen today. Just because the market has moved so far away from those kinds of cars. And even if you look at the sales volumes, for Mercedes and Audi and BMW, for their cars versus their SUVs, it's all going to SUVs, and people are abandoning the car platforms.
Yeah, and I would be thrilled and very curious to see what it would be, but it's definitely not what they should be doing. Yeah. It would be a bad move. The car guys, we would love them. The only way they would get more love from us is if they were to make a wagon, which is also not going to happen. But yeah, Mercedes makes a good car. It's hard to really find fault.
And they still make wagons too.
Yeah,
really good wagons.
They sure do.
The E-Class wagon is awesome.
How did you feel about? You said it didn't feel all that powerful, although it's it's an under 5 second to 60 car.
I mean it's powerful, and it feels it. It's I think about 463 horsepower, 516 foot-pounds of torque. It's got plenty of performance. In a car this size, it's not going to. Let's put it this way: it doesn't feel like the Alfa Romeo Giulia, that just leaps off the line. But it moves with authority. So you never felt lacking for power. But it's clearly it's targeted at a very different audience, and it's it's someone that wants that effortless power. When you step on it, it's just going to go. And it's not. It's not going to, throw your head back against the headrest, and crush your brain, the way a Tesla would, because it's a mere 4.8 seconds from 0 to 60, as opposed to, half that for a Model S with ludicrous mode. But you can use it consistently, and it just works everywhere.
Yeah, I think that probably mirrors my impression of the E400 powertrain, because it's a similar engine in that it's turbocharged, and I think it's a hot V as well. I know the V8 that you drove was a hot V for quick response and better packaging. And so in the E400, it's a 3-liter bi-turbo V6. On paper, it's not that powerful. It's only like 329 horsepower and 354.
You need to get the AMG E43.
Yeah, absolutely.
To about another 100 horsepower.
And I expected, with twin turbos on a 3-liter engine, I would expect it to be more like 400 horsepower. But it's no slouch. It definitely didn't feel like it was weak in any way. I did also have the perspective of coming off a week with an M550i, which is very powerful. So that was, this is it's adequate. You don't need to ask. You don't need to know the number.
And it's the absolute numbers are irrelevant. When you're in this kind of market segment.
Yeah, and it's lovely to drive. It's not quite as confident in its sporty modes. I did find that like Sport Plus was just way too touchy. Did the S550 have or 560 have that? Do you have the dynamic modes?
Oh yeah, it has dynamic modes, and this one also had the Magic Sky Control, which is you've got the panoramic moonroof on the back, but you can the back section of it you can alter the transparency of the glass. So it's like on the Boeing 787 windows, where instead of having shades on the glass, there's an electrochromic coating on there. You can change the opacity of it, so you can make it darker or lighter, depending on how much light you want to let through.
I mean, that's
a $5,000 option.
Yeah, some of the prices of this stuff is breathtaking.
Yeah. And this is before you even get into some of the custom build stuff. You can go through the catalog and pick all these cool things on there. Like the electrically heated windshield, which again does a really nice job of clearing ice frost off the windshield very rapidly. The refrigerator. You got all these cool features on there. The Burmeister high-end 3D surround sound system for $6,400, and then from there you can go crazy. You can go to your dealer and say, I just don't quite like the hue of the leather on these seats. I want something, just a couple of shades darker on the Pantone scale, or lighter, or whatever. Or I want a leather that comes from a particular type of cow, and they'll happily do that for you, for some undisclosed amount of money. That's one of the things about buying cars from the big German manufacturers is they will, whatever you like, they will get it for you for a price.
Yeah. So it's hard to walk away from a week with the Mercedes and not be anything but, impressed with both the vehicle and the outfitting, and the insane amount of money that
I do have to mention one other thing that I also very much appreciated. Mercedes does offer support for both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, unlike BMW, who only supports Apple CarPlay. And Mercedes is only the second manufacturer I've seen after Honda that mirrors when you're using Android Auto and Google Maps, it will mirror the navigation prompts in the head-up display.
Oh, that's nice.
So you don't have to look over at the central screen. You can just keep looking down the road, and the prompts will be right there in front of you.
Oh, you know what? How did you find Command to use, or whatever they're calling it now? Their system
it's
with
Command minus an A, I think. I think they dropped the A. It's fine. I think I would probably prefer. You've got that. There's the touch controller that overhangs the rotary knob.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Yeah, and I think I would prefer it without that, and just have the rotary knob there, because I can do everything in the rotary knob. I mean, the touch controller that overhangs it, gives you a surface, to use your finger to, do your address entry and things like that. I mean, the handwriting recognition works fine. It's slower than, just twisting the knob. And, when I'm using Android Auto, I just push the knob over to the right, and then, that pulls up the Google Voice controls, and I can do everything vastly quicker anyway. So, in general, the command stuff is fine. I would just lose the touch part of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't like maybe it's just the physical design of that wheel and the control pad and stuff. It didn't seem as easy to use as MMI or iDrive, and the system
Mercedes
itself
does give you the option to disable the touch part of it, so the pad is there.
Yeah,
but it doesn't respond to touch inputs. Then you can just rest your hand on it, and you can use the rotary controller.
Yeah, and I think that's what I did, because you wind up resting your hand on that pad anyway when you're using the rotary controller, and I don't know. It didn't seem as intuitive as the other systems. Like, it almost feels like it's going a step back. I used to like Command more. I don't want to ramble about it. I just figured we'd try to touch on all the points of the very fancy cars that are full of, like, everything.
And some.
Yeah. So, let's return to the idea, though, of being driven and having the car do the driving, because you can actually experience that if you go to Phoenix, or maybe you can't experience it, but you can see it in action.
Well, you'll be able to experience it fairly soon. So, as we talked about last week, I was in California at the beginning part of last week with Waymo, at their test track in the Central Valley, to experience riding around in one of their Chrysler Pacifica vans with no one sitting in the driver's seat. And so the timing of that event, as we now know, came just before they made an announcement this week in Portugal, on Tuesday in Portugal, that they were going to start deploying those vans in the Phoenix area. They've been testing them in the greater Phoenix area for about a year now, with a safety driver in the front seat, to keep an eye on things and take over if needed. And they're now confident enough with the performance of those vehicles in that area that they've now started to run them without a safety driver up front. There's still a Waymo employee in the second row seat, where there's a kill switch to shut down the vehicle if need be, but there's no one in the front, the left front seat anymore. And they're going to be testing like that for the next couple of months. And then they're going to start picking up passengers on their ride hailing service in that area, starting specifically in the Chandler area, and then gradually expanding over time to cover the entire greater Phoenix area. So,
I mean, this is just another step. Like, I think it has to happen. They've been doing all kinds of simulation. I'm sure it's, the amount of miles that their systems have covered is pretty deep already. Is this just the only thing that you can do once you drive all those simulated miles, and even in a controlled environment, actual driving? Like, now you have to put this stuff out in actual reality, put it into chaos and see how it learns and how well it's already learned. Like, there's nowhere else for it to go, really, right? Like, this is the logical next step.
They've been running their vehicles in chaos for several years now, in Mountain View, and in Phoenix and Portland and Austin. So they have been testing them on real roads, and the results they've got, they've accumulated about 3.5 million miles of real world testing, along with a couple of billion miles of simulated testing. And between all of that, they are confident enough in the performance of the system, at least in the kinds of conditions they're going to experience in Phoenix, for example, where, they don't really have winter. It doesn't snow there. It rains only sporadically, at certain times of the year. And so, you're talking about pretty much ideal conditions for this type of vehicle to operate in, at least from an environmental standpoint. They're fairly confident that it's going to work there. And so that's why they're starting to do their testing there, and they'll see what happens. They'll keep monitoring it and looking at how the vehicles behave, and also at how the people riding in them interact with the vehicles and the user experience, which is one of the things they talked a lot about last week, was user experience and building trust with the riders in these vehicles. So we'll see how that works out over the next year.
Yeah, well, that's going to be pretty important. I mean, one of the key points that I think Alex Roy's brought up is like, we'll know this stuff has arrived when you're willing to put your kid on it without you there, right? And that's a good point. It also seems like all the things that Waymo is talking about, how they're going to use the vehicles for like commuting to work or getting home from a night out or taking kids to school. Like, just sounds like public transit, like pop-up public transit to me.
Well, and that's the thing, with as we start to deploy these automated mobility services, the thing about public transit is it works really well, in cities, where there are, where there are certain high density routes. It works great for high density routes.
Yeah.
So where you've got a lot of people going from going to the same locations all the time, then it makes economic sense because you've got enough scale from the passengers. The problem you tend to have in a lot of cities is you end up, because you want to serve as many people as possible, you tend to end up with a bunch of routes that are underutilized. And so the cost of operating those routes is, it doesn't pull in enough fare revenue to justify it. But, because of the nature of the transportation system we have today, we need to offer those options. So by bringing in smaller vehicles, van-sized vehicles where you can still have multiple riders, and then even smaller pod-type vehicles at some point, you add extra flexibility to the system. And I think one of the things that absolutely has to happen as we have companies starting to deploy automated mobility services is, and I talked about this yesterday. I was on a panel at a conference here in Detroit on it was a legal conference, and talking about the global outlook for automated vehicles. And one of the things I brought up was that we need to start putting in place frameworks for how these automated mobility services are going to fit into the rest of the transportation ecosystem in cities. Cities need to start laying down these frameworks because these systems need to be coordinated with the mass transit systems, because they're places like New York and Chicago and LA and San Francisco, there are certain routes that you want to have mass transit. That's what's going to work best. You don't want to completely replace mass transit with individual vehicles for a lot of routes. But for the other routes, to fill in that first mile, last mile, and fill in, what Ali Vahabzadeh from Chariot likes to call transit deserts, where there's just not enough people to justify a mass transit route. You need different size vehicles to fill in those gaps and provide the full coverage to all the different places where people need to get to.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes perfect sense. And it also makes it a lot more affordable to do it with this kind of technology and infrastructure than something, more traditional. Like light rail has been this impossible dream for so long. And it's just not viable in the places where it's actually even wanted. A lot of times you can't make the numbers work. And then the timelines stretch out too. Like Waymo could, or any of the other companies that are also working on this stuff, that you can go in there basically with the technology in a very short span of time, and it would be up and running.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very attractive. What you said about cities having to figure out how this stuff is going to interface with the rest of us who prefer our chaos, sort of analog, I guess. Bob Lutz lays out a very dark vision as well. And I know Bob Lutz is Bob Lutz, but he also, to a large degree, he does know what he's talking about, or he at least speculates from a point of unique understanding, where he's saying basically like driving has like another 20 years, and that's really about it. Like self-driving. Do you share that dark vision?
I think certainly for urban, driving in urban areas, I think he's probably right. I think by the mid 2030s, you will have probably very few people driving individual vehicles in dense urban environments. I mean, it won't make sense. It won't make economic sense. And I mean, it's just not a fun thing to do anyway. I mean, even if you love to drive, I mean, I love to drive, and I hate driving in dense urban centers. I mean, it's a terrible experience from what it costs to park, to what it costs to to ensure, if you live in those areas, to insure the vehicles and operate the vehicles, it just doesn't make any sense. And so I absolutely agree that, the sooner we can make that transition safely, and that's the key, is we've got to do it safely, and we've got to coordinate all these pieces. I don't think that I don't think we can just take a completely laissez-faire attitude to how this stuff gets deployed. I think we really need to work to coordinate it as much as possible, so that we're making the best use of the infrastructure we have. Because if we take a completely hands-off approach to how this stuff is deployed, you're going to end up making the congestion problem so much worse. If you suddenly have, fleets of, tens of thousands of these vehicles descending on a city, and they're all trying to stop, here, there, and everywhere to pick up and drop people off, it has the potential to make the problems way worse. So we need to find ways to make all these pieces work together. But I think that can be done as long as, local leaders, have the backbone to stand up to some of these companies and say, look, this is what we need to do. And the companies are willing to recognize that, if we want to be part of this ecosystem, we all need to cooperate and work together.
Yeah. And I think we're kind of nibbling around the edges of what's going to be really as big a shift as, going from horses to cars was in terms of cities, soon. Think of how our cities are built.
People still ride horses; they just don't ride them around in cities. And it's going to be the same thing with cars. Out in the countryside, people will still be able to, take their cars out, out on country roads and drive around. And there's going to be lots of places where autonomous mobility just doesn't make sense. But for a lot of locations, and there's a lot of places where it's going to take a while before those vehicles can really be a viable alternative, because they're going to be expensive, servicing these vehicles is going to take people with some skills. Just yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, they launched an autonomous service, pilot program in Las Vegas using a Navia Arma shuttle. Same thing that we've got a couple of them running here in Ann Arbor on the University of Michigan North Campus, shuttling people around. And within an hour of it starting operation, a truck backed into it. And it did relatively minor damage to it, but it took the vehicle offline for a couple of days, so that they could go through and test and recalibrate all the sensors and everything so it could work properly. And little fender benders like that, have the potential to be fairly disruptive to these vehicles, in the near term, until we figure out how to work with them. Yeah.
Well, I know that sometimes we feel a little negative about this stuff, or at least I come off as a little negative about it. But I'm encouraged that Waymo's putting their stuff out there, and they're making the next step. And I think, honestly, of all the companies that are working on it, they've probably been the most, if not the most, one of the most sort of serious, head down, systematic, really carefully approaching the problem.
Certainly of the non-automotive companies, I think they have been by far the most diligent in terms of making sure that they get it right and not rolling out the stuff until they are really confident that it's going to work. I know John Krafcik, their CEO, and I trust that he's going to do the right thing, and that they're not going to put anything out there and start picking up passengers until they know that it's going to be safe. Yeah.
So good. We'll move on now. We'll have some fun. Because apparently the 2019 Corvette ZR1 has leaked, and it's not the mid-engine Corvette that we've been promised since the 70s.
Well,
late 60s.
I think that this, by all appearances, this is probably the last gasp of the front-engine Corvette. The this is the last great traditional Vette that we're going to see, and this is going to be apparently unveiled on Saturday, as we 2 days from now as we record this, at the Dubai Auto Show.
That's the perfect place to unveil it because it's hideous and they like ugly cars.
Yeah. The front end is pretty aggressive, but basically what they've done is they've taken a Z06, and they've turned it up to 12, because the Z06 was already kind of at 11,
right.
So it's an upgraded version of the 6.2 liter supercharged V8, with another 100 horsepower, and
they're calling it
cooling.
They're calling it the LT5 now, which
right.
It's not an LT5. Thank you.
They've reused all their engine codes numerous times. The current LT4 is not the LT4 they were building in the late 60s, early 70s either. It's a very different engine too.
I know, but nothing means anything anymore.
Did it ever mean anything? They're all just arbitrary codes. That's all marketing stuff. I don't have an issue with them calling this engine the LT5.
I don't really either. When I think of LT5, I think of that that original
the Lotus designed Mercury Marine built.
Yeah. Right. And I was going to say the original ZR1 engine, but that's not the original ZR1.
Right. The original ZR1 engine was a normally aspirated, big 4-barrel carburetor, big block. I think it was a big block, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the early 60s, right? It was
no, it was like 68, 69.
Oh, was the ZR1? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it was probably like one of the first Mark IVs then.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
C3, as a C3.
Right, but I'm sorry, the V8 was a Mark IV V8.
No, that would have been,
or was that later?
Well, if it was a big block, it's not. It was that was a first generation big block. So, anyway, the details are unimportant.
I like how we just dove right into the history.
The thing is, this engine is putting out twice as much power as that last LT5 30 years ago. As impressive as that engine was, the first, twin overhead cam, 32 valve V8 in a Corvette, it had half the output of this thing. And I have no doubt that, that this will be far and away the fastest Corvette ever built, right up until they launch the mid-engine Corvette, maybe as soon as the Detroit Auto Show. We'll see.
So I'm not the first person to have this thought, but I'm a real fan of the front engine Corvette, and beyond that, I think about other cars that are sort of in this realm, and I'm a real fan of front engine Ferraris too. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they'd split the lineup and have the front engine Corvette and the mid engine Corvette?
I think that's actually a distinct possibility. Because the thing is, if they shift to a mid-engine Corvette, which we've seen more than enough spy photos of the prototypes, that I think it's a foregone conclusion there will be a mid-engine Corvette, and after all these many decades, Don Sherman will finally be right that there's a mid-engine Corvette.
You know what? If you keep saying right. It's the broken clock thing, man.
That's right. Sooner or later, he's going to be right about it.
And in his defense, I think they've probably been toying with this off and on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since
they have built so many prototype mid-engine Vettes over the last 60 years. It's ridiculous. There's a reason why the rumor won't die, because they keep building them. They just never sell them.
And it's easy to get confused too, because at some point, I'm sure the Fiero mules could have been mistaken for some sort of Corvette. It's just maybe not.
I wouldn't say that, but they were a lot smaller.
Yeah, that's true. They were.
Actually, this is something we were actually talking. I was talking about with actually last year. At the Concours of America here in Plymouth, Michigan, with Don and a few other folks. When we first started seeing the first spy photos of the prototype mid-engine Vettes, and Don Don was absolutely positively convinced that they were going to do it this time. And I think I was talking with Mark Phelan from the Detroit Free Press, and I think between the two of us, I think we came to the conclusion that if they did the mid-engine Vette, they would almost certainly continue to build front-engine Vettes as well. Because the thing is, you're never going to be able to sell 25, 30,000 mid-engine Corvettes a year. I mean, I think the market is just not going to be that big because it's going to be a much more expensive car. That's something you're going to sell maybe 2,000 or 3,000 a year, if that, maybe less. I mean, Ford, is only doing 250 GTs a year for a 4-year run. So the mid-engine Corvette I see, as being this, this high end, so for the first time, you're going to have, two distinct models within the Corvette lineup. You're going to have the mid-engine version, which is your super premium one, which will form the basis of their next generation GT car that they run at Le Mans and an IMSA, and then the front engine Corvettes, will continue probably at least for several more years, if not longer, because that's where the volume is going to be. There's clearly, I mean, if they can sell 25, 30,000 Corvettes a year, there's clearly demand for a car of that type. And you're never going to be able to do a mid-engine Vette for $60,000-$65,000 like you can do with the base front engine car.
Yeah, it's certainly not. You're gonna have to sacrifice something, and we're all tired of sacrificing our Corvettes. Thank you. You're gonna make them better.
Yeah. Well, I think there's from aside from whatever you might think of the styling, I don't think there's much sacrifice in this ZR1. The racing shell seats that are in there sounds like it's actually going to be a bit heavier because of some of the extra hardware, but there's more than enough power to compensate for that. And these things certainly seem to be running very quickly in all the videos we've seen of the prototypes running around the Nürburgring for the last 6 months.
Yeah, well, and the extra cooling is good because that was sort of a sticking point. I mean, this is just. I'm sure it's going to put up numbers. I'm okay. I'm having a problem with the way it looks, and the way it looks is, I'm sure, very functional. It's just like it's a little overly festooned for my tastes, but also like. I'm just picturing this thing like slowly going around town.
Well, and
just like this, and that just burns me up.
Problem, I mean, with any of these cars, whether it's a Corvette or a Ferrari or a Porsche, driving them around town is not, I mean, the people that will, many of the people, not everybody, but many of the people that will buy these things, are buying them to show off how much money they have. And so they're, driving around places like South Beach, in Miami or, Las Vegas or Beverly Hills, at 15 miles an hour. And, it's a complete waste of a car like this. This car belongs on the track or, belongs in the canyons above Malibu. And that's, even there, with this much performance, it's hard to really utilize it all, anywhere but on a racetrack. So that is, kind of the tragedy of all of these super performance cars.
Yeah, and I'm sure like in a track environment, it wouldn't look as ridiculous to me. On the cover of a magazine, like it's just pretty hard to not just have everything in stark relief. So in the right environment, all this stuff makes sense. I want to see it like, dirty with soap numbers on the windows and stuff, like you use the thing for what it's for.
Absolutely.
That's a little too much automotive philosophy. But I mean, anytime there's a new
there's no such thing as too much automotive philosophy.
All right. I can continue, but I think we probably should move on. Oh. Because anytime there's a new Corvette, it's exciting. And, now we have that we're one step closer to that mid-engine car. I will have to come up with something to do when it actually happens. Cause I'm just like, that's never going to happen. It's that, like, honestly, since I've been alive, that's been supposed to happen. It hasn't happened yet. So like, I need to.
Well, you know what? If it doesn't happen this time, GM will have pulled off the biggest troll in automotive history. You know, just trolling Don Sherman for the last 3 years.
Why would you want to do that? Like, I mean, he doesn't seem like a bad guy.
I can see Mark Royce doing that to Don Sherman.
Okay. All right.
I don't think it is this time. Just because of the number of the prototypes that we've seen. You know, I mean, we've seen photos where, you know, it's not just a single car that's running around. I mean, you know, we've seen spy photos of multiple cars together, you know, being tested. So I think I'm pretty convinced it's real this time.
Yeah, well, that's not the most bonkers thing GM has ever done anyway. I mean, they've tried to reinvent the car business like 3 or 4 times with disastrous results. Like a mid-engine Corvette seems kind of tame in comparison. So good luck, GM. Send one to us once you have them in production so we can talk about it. I will absolutely eat crow if there's a mid-engine Corvette and I actually get to drive it. All right, moving on. Let's skip that one last topic because we're starting to run long, and we had some questions on Twitter which we should hit before we go.
Okay.
So the first question we got, while I wait for that to load, was actually from last week, and it's more about like a charging etiquette question. So a friend of the podcast has I think it's an Optima plug-in hybrid. And so he went to Whole Foods and he plugged into one of their level 2 chargers. There's 4 spots, so he was only, taking one of them. And then he walks back, and someone with a Model S had come in and unplugged him and was using it. And it was more of an annoyance.
That person should, clearly be going to find a supercharger somewhere.
Yeah, that person's probably an entitled jerk.
Well, actually,
but, I mean,
I think in general, the etiquette, if it's a plug-in hybrid and somebody with a battery electric vehicle, entitled jerk aside, somebody with a battery electric, they don't have an option. They need to charge. If they're low on charge. So here's the thing. It depends on on the specific situation. If somebody with a Model S has got 100 miles of range left, and they're 5 miles from their house, they should not be unplugging any other car, plug-in hybrid or otherwise, to put a few more kilowatt hours into their battery, so they don't have to do it at home. Do it at home. I mean, you've got enough range, do that. But if you're low on juice, say you're driving, a Nissan Leaf or, any of the first generation of these modern EVs that only have 70 or 80 miles of range, then I think it's perfectly valid, if you're getting low, if you're down to 25 or 30%, and you have a couple of other stops to make, if you're taking the charger from a plug-in hybrid, then if there's no other chargers available, if that's the only one available, then I think that's okay, because the plug-in hybrid is still going to be able to get home. Yeah, you may have to use a little bit of gas, but you can still get where you need to go. So it's kind of the for charging, the BEVs get priority, then plug-in hybrids after that, and that's kind of the way it should go. But really, you should. You can generally tell if a car is still charging or if it's done. I mean, there's usually some kind of indicator on the outside, either a light on the top of the dashboard that flashes while it's charging, or in some cases a light around the charger itself. And if the car's fully charged, go ahead and unplug it. That's okay. If it's still charging, certainly don't unplug another EV, to plug in. Wait until they're done. If you have to wait, you have to wait. I mean, that's one of the sacrifices you make to drive a battery electric vehicle. But if it's a plug-in hybrid and you really need to charge, then I think that's okay.
All right. I mean, I can understand the whole plug-in hybrid thing. That makes some sense. My outrage has cooled. I feel like I'm profiling Tesla drivers, Model S drivers, for just some crazy reason. I can't really put my finger on it.
There's a new BMW driver.
Right. But
at least according to the way the Top Gear guys used to define BMW drivers.
I think I'm probably towing that line. The Optima apparently has a green light on the dash indicating that it's charging. So that might be one of the things that causes confusion, because green lights generally mean like, hey, I'm done. When it comes to battery chargers.
I'm pretty sure it flashes while it's charging, even though it's green.
Yeah.
It's flashing. Once it's full, then it'll just go solid green.
Look, we can't expect the entitled to be looking for nuance. I'm sorry, but no, I mean, it's a good point. Like, I do agree with the point of like, look, I understand like if you're a plug-in hybrid. I guess if it were me, I'd at least leave an apologetic note on the car and be like, "Hey, I'm sorry I unplugged you."
Yeah, and actually, that's a good thing to do. Just explain, hey, I had a battery electric. I know you've got a plug-in hybrid, and you'd like to use as little gas as possible, but it is a hybrid, and I don't have that option, and I needed to get somewhere, and so that's why I unplugged you.
I mean, you could even print up little cards like Vistaprint, who does not sponsor the podcast. Actually, you could make them.
Actually, back in the day, when I was working with the Ford communications team, we actually did that. We designed a card for EV charging etiquette that you could stick on your dashboard, and little cards that you could put on other people's cars to say, hey, I unplugged you for whatever reason, or here's the kind of the list of priorities if you need to charge. Here's what takes first dibs.
Yeah, I mean, still, you're going to wind up with fistfights at some point because people are touching other people's stuff, and that's just I understand that, but you make a good point. So I've gotten over my outrage for now.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question. Daryl is in the market for a Cadillac ATS, and so he's trying to pick between the Turbo 4 and the V6. Mileage is roughly the same. CPO prices are roughly the same. Either are lighter than competitive cars, which is true. The ATS is actually a very impressively. We were talking about impressive engineering earlier. That's a pretty impressive package. What else should he look for on either engine?
In terms of performance, the Turbo 4 and the V6, I think, are pretty comparable. The one thing that might tip you is in one direction or the other is whether you prefer a manual transmission. And clearly, manual transmission is always the right answer. Therefore, you would want to go with the Turbo 4 because you couldn't get the V6 with a manual. But newer models do have an 8-speed automatic. I think it basically comes down to your choice of transmission. If you want a manual, then it's a Turbo 4. If you can live with an automatic, you can go with either one. Whichever one you prefer, the color and options that are on there, and the whatever better deal you can get.
And so the 6-speed is only 1 year, right? It's 2015 only. And then they came out with the
6-speed manual.
No, the 6-speed auto. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it was up through 2015. So from whenever they launched ATS, I think in 2013 or 14. Oh,
is it that old? Jeez, I'm getting old.
I think so. It was the
days all blend together, Sonny. Yeah, I definitely don't buy the first year of it. That's my first year model experience saying like first year cars are generally very different from second, third, fourth. Like the rest of them are fine. They still do some of their testing. I think.
ATS actually launched in 2012.
Really? Is that old?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a 2013 model launched in 2012.
So, I mean, yeah. So if you're getting like a 14 or a 15 and it's got the 6-speed, I don't know that you're really going to You really going to notice any difference? I'd have to drive them to discern a difference.
I think I would probably opt for the newer one with the 8-speed if you're going to go automatic.
Yeah, that's the ZF is a better that's the ZF, right? Or is that a hydromatic?
It's a hydromatic.
Is it? Oh,
yeah. That's a GM designed 8-speed.
It's probably going to be better.
Yeah, GM doesn't use the GM is one of the few companies that did their own 8-speed and did not go for the ZF automatic, the ZF 8-speed. Fiat Chrysler uses that. Most of the Europeans use it, but GM never did.
Good for them. I mean, GM makes great automatic transmissions. Generally.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The big difference for me is how willing is it to give you a downshift, multiple gears, that kind of stuff. So, also the Turbo 4 with the manual, I think there's probably more aftermarket available
combination.
For that. Yeah.
You probably won't find very many of them, but if you can find one, it's a nice combination.
Yeah, and whatever a Camaro with that combination will respond to, an ATS with that combination will also respond to. So if there's other tuning stuff you can do to it. Because I mean, I know that the GM Turbo 4, which I think this engine is related to. Like,
it is. It's the corporate 4-cylinder turbo.
Yeah. So is this the same as like the Ecotech Turbo or whatever they called it? That you could get like a stage 3 in the Cobalt SS and make it like 300 plus horsepower.
One and the same.
Yeah, that's a good engine.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. You're not going to go wrong with either that engine or the V6. And I think you'll definitely have more tuning capability with the Turbo 4.
And you're going to want it because the Turbo 4 may be a little bit underwhelming stock. Maybe. I don't know. I look at the ATS and
I've driven the 4-cylinder ATS. It's fine.
Is it? I just look at that car and I'm like, that just needs a small block in it. just all of the CTS, the ATS, they all need it.
I mean, any car is going to, generally going to be better with a small block. I mean, you really
I know.
can't go wrong with that engine.
I know.
I mean, the small block was, talking about miracles of engineering. That engine, they have managed to get so much out of an impressively small package. I mean, they don't call it a small block for nothing. That is a remarkably compact and relatively lightweight package, especially in the modern iterations with the aluminum block and heads. Fully dressed, it's a 400-pound engine. For the normally aspirated ones, the supercharged versions in the Corvettes and in the CTS-V are heavier, but
they also make like 800 horsepower.
Yeah, there's a reason why, over the last, 30, 40 years, we've seen so many other brands of cars, that were, that were otherwise, really nice, but, may have had troublesome powertrains, especially, those that came out of factories in the British Midlands, that you often find them retrofitted with, GM small block V8s. And, they run beautifully for decades after that.
Yeah. There was a whole company, and I don't even know if they're still around. There was a whole company called Jags That Run.
Yeah.
That was basically their business was swaps, like Chevy small block swaps into Jaguars. So they would make the mounts, and they actually had a kit. There was a Jags That Run kit for
JagsThatRun.com.
Right. There's a small block kit for Volvo 240s and 740s as well.
They do a Jaguar, a Datsun Z, a Chevy S10 pickup.
Oh, an S10 with a small block. That's
Volvo 200 series and 700.
Right. So they do the engine mounts, the brackets to relocate the mounts and the wiring and the basically just like the how-tos. Here's all the parts you need. Go get them.
LS1 RX-7.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, I think we've just tried to say, get an ATS and then get a V8 and then put them together. If you don't want to do that, just get the 4-cylinder turbo with the manual. If that's your thing, if you're a driving enthusiast and you like to shift, that would be the one that I would pick. I'm sure the V6 with the auto is delightful as well. But the one I would pick would be the 4-cylinder.
Definitely.
And I think we've made the decision. That's it. I think we should kill the podcast.
Okay.
This week, only this week. We'll be back.
We'll definitely be back next week.
Yeah. So we'll be a year and 1 week into it. But yeah. So
and next week I'll be coming to you from Silicon Valley.
Excellent. We can talk about the joys of the Valley. I'm trying to think of how we can make it a more Valley flavored show. I guess it doesn't really matter. We could charge people to listen.
We can add some AI to it.
Yeah. Great. Well, in the meantime,
we'll make it Wi-Fi connected and, start, charge $700 per episode for it.
Right. And it's going to have to squeeze itself.
You'll have to buy bags of chopped up fruit to go with it.
Excellent.
$10 a pop.
Well, in the meantime, enjoy this episode. You can catch us at, we are Facebook, Wheelbearings Media, Wheelbearing Media on Facebook. We are Wheelbearings Cast, only vowel is the A in cast on Twitter. Please leave us reviews on iTunes and Apple Podcasts.
We really appreciate it. We've gotten some wonderful positive reviews on iTunes, and we really appreciate that. And we'd love more. We are not bashful. We'll take all the good reviews you can want to give us.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, if there's also constructive feedback, please feel free to let us know how we're doing. Let us know if there's something that you would prefer us to do less of or more of. And
that reminds me. I think we did have an email.
Dan, you got to shut up. That's what I want you to do.
An email from Jonathan Brown suggesting that we might want to break up the show into a couple of pieces and publish it a couple of times a week. And the beauty of podcasting is that you can hit pause anytime you want, and if you want to listen to it in 2 chunks instead of 1 hour and a half chunk, you can do that. You can listen to it in 10 chunks if you like.
But also to Jonathan's point, I've also had this discussion. I think what we may consider doing, if I can get around to it, is actually splitting off the car segment and publishing that on its own, not as anything other than here, if you're just interested in hearing about the cars, you can just listen to this one piece and it'll be shorter. That's something that we're considering. So let us know if you think that's worthwhile. And otherwise, we'll catch everyone next week.
See ya.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.